Anglican chant is a way of singing a text, any text, to a repeating progression of musical chords. It is a helpful musical tool for the Christian singer to have at his disposal because it enables him to sing the scriptures unaltered, without any modifications to the words, such as rhyme scheme or poetic meter. Here's a typical example of an Anglican chant.
Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word.
In this chant, there is a reciting tone, followed by an ending, or cadence, of 3 chords. Then there is a second reciting tone, followed by a cadence of 5 chords. This is the standard pattern for an Anglican chant. On the page, Anglican chant looks like metered music, consisting of whole notes and half notes. However, this notation is somewhat misleading. An Anglican chant is not strictly metered, and its measures do not all have exactly the same length. Not all of the whole notes, for example, are exactly 4 beats long, as typical whole notes would be. Take, for instance, the reciting tones, which I mentioned before. As their name implies, these are the notes where the singers recite most of the words. The reciting tones do not have a specified length. They are just as long or as short as the words require. If there are many syllables to be recited on that tone, then it will last a long time. If there is only a single syllable, then that reciting tone will be short, perhaps even less than a musical beat. Listen to this excerpt from Psalm 91. All of the highlighted words are sung on the first reciting tone, making that reciting tone very long.
1,000 shall fall beside thee, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee.
A reciting tone can also be very short, as in this example, where the only word to be sung on the reciting tone is the word and.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As you can tell from these examples, Anglican chant is a sort of hybrid musical creature. Its reciting tones behave one way, and its cadential notes behave another way. The reciting tones have no specified length. They are as long or as short as the words require, whereas the notes of the cadences are much more like conventional musical notes with specific lengths. To put it another way, the syllables sung on the reciting tones should be declaimed at the same pace as conversational speech. If one were reading the words of the Gloria Patri, one would pronounce them at this speed. Glory be to the Father, and that is exactly how fast one sings those same words. Glory be to the Father, and... By contrast, the syllables sung on the cadences have a steady musical pulse, and therefore are not pronounced at the same speed as spoken words. For instance, one would never read aloud, to the Holy Ghost. Yet that is how one sings those words in this example, making them conform to a regular musical pulse. To the Holy Ghost. To put that whole example together, end to end, reciting tone and cadential notes, it would sound like this. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost. The chants that we have examined thus far have been just 7 musical measures long. When a chant tune is 7 measures long, it is called a single chant. As we have seen, these single chants have 2 reciting tones, each followed by a cadence. But there is also such a thing as a double chant. Here is an example of one. A double chant is 14 measures long and contains 4 reciting tones. We'll have more to say about double chants later. Now let's talk about the symbols that appear in the text. Symbols like vertical lines, dots, and bold font. These symbols show how the syllables of the text line up with the musical notes. This is called the pointing of the text. Not all printed collections of Anglican chant use the same symbols for their pointing. Just to illustrate how different these can be, this collection uses horizontal brackets to separate cadential notes. It uses half vertical lines to indicate bar lines, and double dots to indicate melismas. By contrast, this collection uses single dots to separate cadential notes. It uses right single quotes to indicate bar lines, and it does not indicate melismas at all. So depending on which book you are drawing from, the nomenclature may differ from what is used in this video. However, even if the symbols are different, they are still conveying the same kind of information. They are showing how to fit the syllables of the text to the musical notes. So this video presentation will use only one set of symbols to illustrate the principles involved. If your chant resource uses a different set of symbols, it will be up to you to convert this information as needed. The first thing that any system of pointing will indicate is which syllables are sung on the reciting tones and which are sung on the cadential notes. In this video, and in most printed resources, the symbol used to indicate that is a vertical line. So, in this example, the syllables, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant D, are all sung on the reciting tone because they come before the vertical line. The syllables, part in peace, are sung on the notes of the cadence because they come after the vertical line. Here is what it would sound like.
Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace.
To put it another way, you can think of the vertical line as the first bar line in the music. Any syllables before the vertical line are sung on the first whole note. But when the singers reach the vertical line, they transition from the first measure to the notes that follow. Here is one more example.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
Printed collections of Anglican chant can also differ in how much pointing they show. Some books are exhaustive, that is, they indicate every single bar line of the music with some kind of symbol printed in the words. Other collections take a minimalist approach. They only show symbols that are absolutely necessary to prevent ambiguity. If a pointing symbol can be omitted without confusion, they leave it out. This video presentation uses the minimalist approach, and here is how it works. Once the singers reach the vertical line, there is one note for each syllable unless otherwise indicated. Consider this example again.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
All the words before the vertical line are sung on the reciting tone, as we have learned. Glory be to the Father, and... Now we have reached the vertical line, which means we are done singing the reciting tone, and will now sing the notes of the first cadence. Since there are no other pointing symbols, we assume that there is one note for each remaining syllable of this half verse. To the Son. That's one note for to, one note for the, and one note for Son, Son. The second half of the verse works the same way. The syllable and is sung on the reciting tone because it is the only syllable before the vertical line. Again, there are no other pointing symbols, so we can assume one note for each syllable. And to the Holy Ghost. Slowing it down, it would sound like this. And to the Holy Ghost. But what if there are more syllables after the vertical line than there are notes in the cadence? Here is an example of that. Remember that we have a reciting tone followed by a cadence. There are 3 notes in that cadence. However, as you can see, there are 4 syllables after the vertical bar line. Ver, shall, be. What does one do with the extra syllable? Well, the singer still sings one note per syllable, but whenever the singer reaches the final note of the cadence, he remains on that note for all the rest of the syllables. So in this case, he sings one note per syllable. Ver, shall. Since he is out of notes now, he repeats the last note of the cadence, the A flat, for the syllable be. Altogether, it sounds like this. Ever shall be. The next pointing syllable we will discuss is the bold font, which indicates that one syllable is stretched over two musical chords. Here is an example. Notice that in the word salvation, the syllable sal and the syllable ve are both printed in bold font. This means that we are no longer operating by the rule of one note per syllable. Instead, bold font means that there will be two notes sung on each of those syllables. Sal, ve. The whole verse sounds like this.
For mine eyes have seen thy salvation.
The next pointing syllable we will discuss is the single dot. A single dot is used to clarify which half note in a measure goes with which syllable. In such a case, the syllables which appear before the dot belong to the first note, and the syllables which appear after the dot belong to the second note. Here is how this example would sound.
Whoso dwelleth under the defense of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty.
Here is one more example which uses the dot.
Thou shalt not be afraid for any terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day.
When one is singing a psalm to a single chant, that is, to a tune which is 7 musical measures long, each verse of the psalm receives one complete iteration of the tune. So, for example, if you were going to sing this psalm to a single chant, you would sing all 7 measures of music one time through for verse 1, and then you would sing those same 7 measures of music a second time through for the second verse of the psalm, and then you would sing them again for the third verse, and so on. But what about when one is singing a psalm with a double chant? Remember, a double chant is 14 measures long and has 4 reciting tones, so it requires 2 verses of a psalm to get through the tune of a double chant. But not all psalms have an even number of verses. So when a psalm has an odd number of verses, how does one get the music of the double chant to end in the right place? The answer is that the singers have to repeat the second half of the double chant at some point. Here is an example of that. Notice that this chant tune by Samuel Sebastian Wesley is a double chant, with 14 measures of music in the tune. The notation second half, which you can see above verse 5 in italics, means that rather than starting the chant tune over again on verse 5, the singers should repeat only the second half of it again. I will sing verses 3 through 5 so that you can hear how that works.
For behold, from henceforth all generations shall call me blessed. For he that is mighty hath magnified me, and holy is his name. And his mercy is on them that fear him throughout all generations.
Finally, there is the dash. A dash indicates that the singers should skip over a note of the music. In this example, for instance, the singers would skip the second reciting tone completely and jump immediately to the cadence.
Out of the deep have I called unto thee, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice.
Those are the basic instructions in how to sing an Anglican chant. Here endeth the lesson.